And this is where we kind of get we kind of get Max and Lucy's kind of I guess episodes together, because we see Max and Lucy kind of on their journey. They end up stumbling upon a new vault, and this is where we see Vault 4. Um,
Did you notice the color contrast between the two? Max is red, Lucy's blue.
yes, yes,
At least for me anyway, it kind of shows that at least Lucy, she's like this calm kind of person in spite of everything that's been happening to her, whereas Max, even though he kind of like comes off as like this happy-go-lucky kind of guy, you kind of get the feeling there's a lot boiling beneath the surface.
oh yeah. There's
So
definitely some pent up anger with him.
yeah, so I
For
felt like
sure.
the color palettes that they used was kind of brilliant because it kind of shows off like what's going on in their heads, really.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and I totally agree with you of that. I think they are very, I would say, almost obvious with their kind of color coding with like
Yeah.
their kind of personalities. So I think they kind of go to an extreme here, and I think it's kind of cool where we get to see another vault, and obviously Lucy extremely happy about this because she lived in Vault 33 all of her life. So she has this very, I would say, strong approach for how everything's going to be. And Max is very concerned, right? Like he very much doesn't trust the vault. And it's kind of interesting that their their ideas almost turn throughout the whole time they're in Vault 4, right? Where Lucy's initially very happy, but then she starts to get more and more suspicious about everything. We start to see like some of the characters she meets, like for instance, have one eye, right? Or like I said, kind of have other appendages where they're not supposed to be there, or have like kind of these crazy eyes going on. So you start to see her where when she sees the vault for the first time, she's super happy about it, but starts to get more and more kind of shady about everything that's going on.
I mean, it doesn't
Um,
help. It doesn't help that the director, started the conversation off by saying, "Oh, and by the way, don't ever go into level 12." Like,
yes, yes, he very much plays a fool, and I think kind of good to see. What's his name? Luca, help me out here with the actor's name.
Chris Parnell,
Yes, Chris Parnell. Thank
good
you.
old, good
So
old Cyril.
yes, Cyril. Yep. So good to see him here. And like I said, kind of has this very, um, I would say, very dumb kind of mentality here. But yeah, we kind of see, Lucy starts to get suspicious, and it's funny for Max where he's very apprehensive at first. Like once he starts to like be able to like take a shower, and he starts to get like all these amenities and everything, like he starts to really enjoy the vault life. So I kind of liked how one of them initially was happy and starts to become more and more concerned with it, where another one starts off the polar opposite, where they really don't want to be there, but slowly is coming around to that. So I really like that kind of clash with how everything happens. And we see Lucy eventually, kind of gets up and, ends up not following his directions and goes to level 12, where we see like kind of these experiments going on. And I liked how they did this, right? So I like the fact that we as an audience, or at least I did, and you can definitely have, if you have a different viewpoint, let me know. But I like how we're kind of under the impression that people are actually kind of doing the experiments with them, but it's actually not the case. Like the people that we know, they're kind of like the victims in this situation. Like the previous vault goers that were there were the ones doing all the experiments. So Lucy's thinking to herself, like, oh, you people are like messed up and you're doing all this stuff. But really, the people that are of Vault 4, they're very much the victims of all these experiments.
Yeah,
So what did you think about that? Did you like that type of reveal?
yeah. I mean, because it just goes to show that the vaults aren't all monolithic. They're all doing their own thing, and we kind of see it later on where all these execs are saying, you get this X number of vaults where you can do things your own way, and you get this X number of vaults, and you can, you know, rule society your own way. So, but what I think is really really interesting is what you find out in the reveal at the end. It's like maybe people in Vault 4 weren't doing things with the best of intentions.
Absolutely not.
Because you come to find out they're like trying to do some sort of crossbreeding thing.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And like the overseer saying, "Oh yeah, that's my like maternal uncle or something like that,"
Yes.
and
Yep.
it looks oddly enough like that creature that ate the head, or
Yes.
in
Yes.
earlier episodes.
Yep. Yep. And I think that legitimately was the origin of it. So kind of interesting that we kind of saw what I believe to be really the origin of that creature. But yeah, and I liked how, ultimately, we get to the point where Lucy's gonna be killed and obviously in some good old Fallout humor, right, is gonna be killed by going to the surface. So we're expecting her to be kind of executed, but she's actually just kind of more banished to the surface,
Hmm.
but also given 2 weeks of supplies. So really nice for the people that are quote unquote doing the murdering. Really just sent to the surface, which she's been at for quite some time now, and also leaves supplies. So that was nice of them. And I like how, for Max, he kind of takes like the power core to the place, right? So he takes the power core that Vault 4 was using. And, I like how Lucy, being kind of our, I would say, emotionally strong character, right? Like she's kind of the, doing the righteous or the right thing all the time. She kind of convinces Max, like, hey, it's only right for you to give it back to them. So, I think just furthers kind of Lucy's type of mentality, right? Where she is, kind of always out there looking for the greater good. Even though that she's kind of, kind of dealt with all this stuff, that she's, very much still a part of her character. The wasteland never really breaks her. And I like that. Like, there's definitely moments where she starts to maybe teeter on it,
Hmm.
but I think for the most part, she doesn't ever kind of waver in her resolve to kind of be I guess, the example that she wants to be the wasteland to be.
So
Um,
so let me ask you, what did you think about that scene where Max, he like puts on his power suit and he basically goes ape shit on everybody, thinking they're gonna kill Lucy? Because I thought that
yes,
was a pretty
yes,
interesting moment. I thought
yes.
I
No, I
did laugh at
agree.
that.
Yes, I did get a good laugh at that too. And I think just goes to show you, right? It's just about misreading the situation, right? So how Lucy misread all the experiments is like people on Vault 4 doing all this nasty shit to the people when it wasn't like that. Max has that same type of reaction where, he's like, oh, they're going to be killing her, and then ends up just murdering a whole bunch of people, but really they were letting her go in essence. So, yes, I think it's kind of interesting how both of them have this very much kind of similar reactions where they're judging a situation by something it is, just to find out later that it was nothing like what they were thinking was going to be.
But the thing that
Um,
was really, really disturbing was when Lucy, before she goes to level 12, she goes to that community meeting, and it turns out they're all worshiping Moldaver. Like,
yes.
what the hell is that all about?
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think, and we'll get to Moldaver at the very end, so this way we savor for as much as we can, because
But
obviously,
don't you think that's kind of weird? Because
oh yes, for sure,
it's
yes, it
like
was very,
it's just so odd that everybody's just like worshiping her, and all the other vault members like, oh yeah, it's a surface thing, but you have to, but like the overseer said, you kind of have to be nice if you want to win the votes to be overseer for next year.
yes, yep, absolutely, and I think that's, yeah, it is just very interesting how all that works, because yeah, like we see that there's obviously from Moldaver, she has a lot of pull within the greater picture, right? So she's not just kind of this raider that we see initially, like she clearly has a whole lot of other things going on for that. So yeah, it is very interesting how all that happens, and so yeah, so I think we see, I think for, you know, we kind of got characters all ultimately kind of converging on Moldaver, who's in it's that place in California, the observatory, right? I
I,
forget what
I,
the name.
I think it's Observatory Park. I think that's what
Okay,
they
yeah,
call it.
I want to say it's a name. I guess if you're from California, everyone probably knows what that is. But yeah, you know, that's where we kind of have everything converging, because we have
Oh, it's Griffith Park. That's what it
Griffin Park.
is.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. That's what I was looking for. Thank you so much. So, but yeah, so we have, you know, ultimately, Lucy and we have Lucy and Max once they leave Vault 4, end up running into Thaddeus, who in a previously had met up with someone in the credits known as the snake oil salesman, who ends up fixing his very mangled foot, which hopefully you didn't eat food right before you saw that, because that definitely made my stomach kind of hit the ground when I saw him take off his shoe for the first time and you see how messed up his foot is. Now, how did he manage to travel that far on what's pretty much like a totally beat up foot? I don't know, but yes, he did. So we find out that the steak oil salesman did fix his foot, but there was a kind of an after effect that it would seem that Thaddeus ends up, he's now a ghoul. So kind of interesting that we learn a little bit more about kind of the world that we live in, where we don't really know how the ghouls came to be precisely, right? Like I think there's some hints to it, but we can clearly see that ghouls can very much be man-made, as you know, we see the snake oil salesman fix his foot, but you know, makes him, you know, an undead ghoul. So I guess he take the good with the bad type of thing. But you know, we see that our three characters, and that's going to be for Lucy, Max, and Thaddeus get together. You know, Lucy ends up taking the head to Moldaver at Griffith Park, and we see Max returns with the Brotherhood of Steel, and it kind of brings the fake head with him. So just to kind of throw them off so Lucy can continue her mission. So we kind of have our characters getting into their kind of final positions for the end. And I guess this is a good time to bring up the ghoul, because the ghoul, for the most part, we learn not as much about the ghoul currently, but we learn more about kind of the origins of everything that happened. And I think this is where really Cooper, or the ghoul, shines. Is you know, he's kind of on his way to Moldaver as well, but we find out that actually he has a much deeper connection to her. So we see in the past, right, for Cooper, he was kind of like almost the mascot for Vault Tech, right? And I thought that that was kind of really cool to see, where you know, he's kind of this mascot, so he has a strong connection with Vault-Tec, and he's married to someone that's very much a higher up within the Vault-Tec world. And we see in the past, right, him as his human self, he starts to get more and more concerned with Vault-Tec, right? He starts to kind of question it, as far as like what their purpose is, kind of like everything that they're doing. So we see him become more and more suspicious, and it gets to the point where, you know, he ends up meeting Moldaver, right? And we see Moldaver from the past, right, 220 years ago, and we see her very much looking the same, right? I think maybe just a little bit older, but I mean, I think she looks pretty much the same age as she did, and we see, you know, she kind of starts to put those seeds in his head that really Vault-Tec is more than what it seems. You know, this kind of leads Cooper to being very suspicious of his wife, and he ends up getting a kind of like a listening device that he utilizes to overhear this conversation. And I think this is where really our experience of the world gets really thrown on its head, because we see Vault-Tec pretty much is almost wanting the world to come to an end, right? Like they're very much like in this position of like, hey, I'm okay with everything going on because, you know, I want to sell these you know, these vaults to people. So I want all these rich people to be able to pay me money to exist here. And they seem to be like almost complacent, okay with the world ending. And I know about you, it felt very comical at that stage, because I'm like, okay, like I know like corporate greed goes a long way, but damn, like you're kind of at the point where you're almost like, hey, bring on the end of the world type of motif. So I don't know. How'd you feel about kind of the revelations we thought with Vault-Tec and kind of all their, kind of, I guess, all this kind of experimental stuff that they're doing behind the scenes?
Well, there's this one scene where Cooper's meeting up with one of his actor friends at a bar, and his friend
Yes.
tells him that basically he asks him, "Do you know what fiduciary responsibility is?" Right,
Hmm.
and that pretty much that pretty much explains what Voltec is up to, right?
Yes.
Because if Voltec has a responsibility to make money for its investors, they'll do anything
Hmm.
to make sure
Yep.
that that they pay out, even if it includes ending the world. So, but
Yes.
I think the most heartbreaking scene was when Cooper hears his wife talking, and he's like, "Holy shit! Like she's just as corrupt as everybody."
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this does a great job of helping reflect kind of his state of mind, right? Because we look at the ghoul as being this very hardened person, and we see why, right? Like his own wife was very much instrumental to the I don't want the world ending, right? Like that's pretty much was she was very much a big part of that. And I do like how we get all these very interesting revelations throughout the episode, right? Because we see a young version of Hank, right? That is Lucy's father. We see a young version of him, so we see that he was a part of Voltec at the beginning. And then we also see the other one that's the new overseer, right? I forget what. Do you remember what the one that's
Betty.
Betty? Thank you. Right, Betty, and she's the one from Deadpool, right? I just
Yep,
wanted to make sure.
Leslie Uggams. Yep.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to make sure you knew that because I thought that was kind of interesting. I didn't pick up on it initially, but when I saw her again, I'm like, oh yeah, that was super obvious. But yeah, like you start to come up with these revelations that oh, these characters that we kind of know, there's something really weird going on here. Why is Hank, in the kind of this future state? Why is Betty like this? And kind of behind the scenes, we kind of have Lucy's brother, right? He's kind of been, kind of venturing into, Vault 32, and eventually gets to Vault 31, where we find out that, really a lot of these people were put into cryostasis. And it wasn't until they kind of got broken out of cryostasis that they're kind of here. So now we kind of understand why some of this timeline is kind of jarring at the beginning, but we find out like, oh, hey, actually, this is, kind of what's been going on, that some of these people work for Voltec. They were put in stasis, and they come out of stasis. How and when they do it is not really explained. But they're coming out of stasis to kind of help out with kind of running the show there. And I just think that was just so interesting, that reveal of how all these characters are kind of more interconnected than we initially thought, and how that all happened. So how did you like kind of finding out how they kind of like divulge more and more information about kind of Vault-Tec and kind of their underhandedness?
I mean, it's just kind of jarring because you come to find out that all of the overseers came from the same vault, right?
Yes.
Um,
Mm,
what I really liked was when Betty won the election, right? And everybody's celebrating. Norm goes, he goes into Betty's office, and he types in that message to see what's really going on, and he gets that response back, right?
mhm. Yep, from a
So
brain.
a brain in a jar, by the way.
Yes.
It was on a
Yes.
was it on a race car or a roto thingy or
Yeah,
whatever
something
it
like
was?
that. Yes. Hmm.
But it's just so bizarre to think that all of these overseers all came from the same place, right?
Yes.
And what I thought was it was pretty cool, and you didn't mention this before, is the fact that you've got Chet and Norm doing this sort of like buddy cop thing where they're just exploring Vault 32 to see what's going on. And you kind of wonder, man, I really hope that they do more with it. But when they decide to select certain people from Vault 33 to go repopulate Vault 32, Chet goes with them. and and it's so funny because he starts out being in love with Lucy, but through certain circumstances, he ends up being like, I guess, the new husband and father for Steph and her
Yeah.
her child.
Yes.
So it's like he's sort of resigned himself, and he's like, you know what, I'm good. I'm just gonna go ahead and go on with my new life. But
Yes.
but like I said, I mean, just to go back to the reveal, I mean, to find out that everybody came from Vault 31, it just adds more mystery, to another layer of mystery to the story. But but it also just goes to show just how deep Vault Tech, is in, when it comes to bringing about the end of the world.
Yeah.
Because like they said in that meeting, what's the one enemy? It's time, right?
Yep.
And all we got to do is just we don't need to, we don't need to like, beat them or anything. We just need to outlive them. And what better way to do it than to accelerate the end of time than to cause a nuclear fallout?
Yep. Yep. Now, did you, and I don't know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if they ever explicitly say how everything transpired. So I don't want to say that Vault-Tec were the ones that ultimately were responsible for the bombs happening, but they definitely had no problem with them going off.
I think they hinted that they were frustrating the negotiation talks.
Yes.
Because remember they were talking about how the negotiations weren't going well. I think they weren't going well for them, so they had to do something to kind of make sure that they kind of stalled or something.
No, that's good to know, because I wasn't too sure exactly how big of a role they were with that. Obviously, best case scenario for, I guess, depending on how you're looking at it, they were totally just okay with anything that happened. Worst case scenario, they were in essence the ones that were pushing the button, so to speak, for everything to happen. So,
well, I'm thinking what they did was they may not necessarily have been the ones who pushed it, but they sort of encouraged and guided people to do that.
Yes. Yeah, they